Let's go back in time all the way to the first settlers of that region. The first settlers of that region were called Canaanites. Canaanites, Rephaites, Jebusites, all the Nites used to live in this land called Canaan, which is named after the Canaanites. And we can find this information in Genesis chapter 15, when God spoke to Abraham. Afterwards, when Israelites left Egypt thanks to Moses, and they were in the wilderness for a long period of time, they entered into the promised land. And God gave them the promised land by destroying nation after nation that was in the land of Canaan. They had a large kingdom within that region, and that was the kingdom of Israel. This was led by Saul, by King David, by King Solomon. These kings ruled over a united Israel. But then the kingdom split in half, and there was conflict going on between the kingdoms. Eventually, for 1,000 years, the people were sinning against the Lord. And so what God did was he sent a nation after them called Assyria. Assyria then took over that land, and then Babylonia came and took over Assyria and the land that Israel was dispersed, and they were losing their national identity. But God gave Israel a promise that after 70 years, God would bring them back to the promised land, and they would have a land again. And that is what happened. With the Persian Empire taking over Babylonia and the land that Israel was on, the Persian Empire allowed the Israelite Jews to go back to their land. And this is the book of Ezra and Nehemiah, where we see their return and them building the second temple. After the second temple was built, then the Persian Empire was decimated and it was ruled by Alexander the Great. And then after Alexander the Great ruled it for a little while, then another nation sprang up, and after that, the Roman Empire came and conquered that entire land. And so now the Jewish nation was under the authority of the Roman Empire, and this is very important. During this time period, the Jewish people were also being oppressed by the Roman government. And so the Jewish revolt began, and the Jews were revolting against the Roman authority. The Roman Empire came and their armies came and destroyed all of Jerusalem and the second temple, and then all the Jews were dispersed and kicked out of their land for thousands of years. The Roman Empire had to send a message to the rest of the states as well as the conquered nation. So they changed the name of the land of Israel to the Syria Palestina. They named that land after Israel's worst enemy, which were the Philistines. And that name stuck for thousands of years, and so now we have modern day Palestine. After the Roman Empire fell, then the Byzantine Empire came. This is where Christianity spread and started to grow. After the Byzantine Empire started to flourish, then the early Muslim period began, and then that land was conquered by the early Muslims. Then the Crusader period began, and the Crusaders dominated that land. After the Crusaders, then came the Ayyubid people. After the Ayyubid people, then came the Mamluk people. After the Mamluk people, then came the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, after World War I, fell into shambles. Now, Syria Palestina was then given over to the winners of World War I, which was Great Britain and its allies, but Great Britain had control during that time period. And Great Britain made a deal with the people who were living in that land, the Ottomans who were living in that land, as well as they made a deal to give part of that land to the Jewish people prior to the Great War ending. So that land was the British authorities, and they gave it over to both the Jewish nation as well as some of the people that were living in that land. They started to emigrate down to the Promised Land. The Arabian people during that time period really did not like the new settlers coming in. They started a revolt called the Great Arabian Revolt, and this caused a big issue with the British Empire. With this riots going on and many people getting killed, the British Empire decided to have a quota for how many people are allowed into the Promised Land. People who are not able to get through the immigration process were supposed to stay in Europe. And this was a big problem at the time because there was a lot of bad news sources saying that the Jewish nation was bad and terrible, and people started to hate the Jews. And this guy named Adolf Hitler came into power, and he wanted to kill all the Jews. The Jewish people who were not able to go to the Promised Land were stuck in Europe during this time period. It was hard for them to emigrate to any other nation because no other nation would want them. Over 6 million lives were taken during the Holocaust, and it was because of these quotas that were in place. After World War II ended and Adolf Hitler died and the Jewish nation was free, then what happened was the United Nations all agreed for the Israel to have their own land in the Promised Land of Israel. This fulfilled biblical prophecy, and I'll talk about that in a second. These are where the roots of the conflict have begun. Please subscribe, please like this, please share this with someone. God loves you, HC family, and I'll see you guys on the next video.